Elena's Triumph, a tale of betrayal and redemption. Elena Martinez, 30, stood in the mirror of her Southern California apartment, adjusting the delicate ivory lace of her wedding dress. The gown was simple yet elegant, hugging her frame before flowing into a soft train that shimmered under the morning light. Her dark hair was swept into a loose updo, adorned with a sprig of baby's breath, a nod to her late mother's love for wildflowers. Today was the day she'd marry Victor Delgado, 35, the man who'd become her anchor over 3 years of shared dreams, quiet mornings, and hard-won trust. Their wedding, planned for a charming vineyard nestled among rolling hills, promised intimacy over extravagance, 50 guests, handwritten invitations, and a playlist blending Ella Fitzgerald with modern indie tunes they both adored. Yet, as Elena smoothed her dress, a flicker of unease stirred. Victor's family, his mother Margaret and sister Beatrice, had never accepted her, and their subtle hostility had grown into something sharper, more deliberate as the wedding approached. Victor, an architect with a gentle demeanor and a passion for restoring historic buildings, was the opposite of his family's cold scrutiny. His warm brown eyes and steady presence had drawn Elena in from their first meeting at a local art gallery, where they'd bonded over a shared love of mid-century design. They'd built a life together in their cozy apartment, filled with sketches of their future home and shelves of books they read aloud to each other. They weren't perfect. There were late-night arguments over work stress or forgotten plans, but they'd faced those challenges head-on, even attending therapy to navigate their differences. Elena, a marketing consultant who'd clawed her way up from freelance gigs to a thriving business, valued his support. Her childhood in a dusty Arizona town, raised by a single mother who died during her college years, had taught her resilience, but also a guardedness that Victor's family mistook for secrecy. Margaret Delgado, a retired school principal with a penchant for control, had been icy from the start. At their first meeting, over a tense Sunday brunch, she'd grilled Elena with questions that felt like traps. So, your marketing work, it's all online? No office? No colleagues to vouch for you? Her tone implied Elena was hiding something, her gray eyes narrowing as she sipped her mimosa. Beatrice, a graphic designer in her late 30s, was worse. She wielded her sarcasm like a blade, cutting into Elena with remarks like, "You're so private, Elena. No childhood stories, no old photos. What's the deal?" Elena tried to laugh it off, sharing just enough her mother's love for baking, her high school track medals, but it was never enough. Beatrice's bitterness seemed personal, as if Elena's presence threatened her role as the family's gatekeeper. Victor defended Elena, at least at first. "They're just like this with everyone new," he'd say, brushing off their behavior as overprotective. "They hounded my last girlfriend too, until they saw she was harmless." But Elena wasn't convinced. Margaret's fake smiles and Beatrice's pointed digs weren't about caution, they were about power. They saw Elena as an interloper, someone who might loosen their grip on Victor, who'd always been the family's golden son. Still, Elena pushed forward, pouring her heart into the wedding. She handpicked every detail: mason jars filled with wildflowers, a seafood menu inspired by their first date at a coastal cafe, fairy lights to mimic a starry sky. She wanted this day to be theirs, a celebration of the life they were building. But Margaret and Beatrice had other plans, ones that would unravel everything. The vineyard was a vision that morning, with rows of grapevines stretching toward the horizon and a soft breeze carrying the scent of lavender. Guests milled about, sipping Prosecco and admiring the garden setup, a wooden arch draped in white roses, chairs arranged in neat rows, and a string quartet playing softly. Elena walked down the aisle, her heart pounding but her smile steady, locking eyes with Victor. He stood tall in a navy suit, his expression a mix of awe and nerves, his hands clasped tightly as if anchoring himself. The officiant, a warm woman named Clara, with silver hair and a soothing voice, began the ceremony, her words about love's endurance resonating with the quiet crowd. Elena felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this day would be perfect. Then, as Clara reached the traditional question, "If anyone objects to this union, speak now," a voice shattered the stillness. "She's already married to me." A man in a crumpled suit, his tie askew and shirt half untucked, stood from the back row, his shout echoing across the vineyard. Gasps rippled through the guests, chairs creaking as heads turned. Elena froze, her bouquet trembling in her hands. She didn't know this man. His face, his voice were utterly foreign. Victor's complexion paled, his eyes widening before narrowing as he turned to her, searching for answers she didn't have. Margaret stood slowly, her lips curling into a smug nod aimed at Victor. Beatrice leaned over, whispering something to her mother, then shot Elena a smirk that oozed triumph. The man Elena would later learn his name was Paul strode toward the altar, waving a sheaf of papers. "I married Elena in Florida years ago," he declared, his voice loud enough to carry beyond the tent. "She left me, never got a divorce, and now she's committing bigamy." He held up what looked like a marriage certificate, brandishing it like evidence in a courtroom. Victor's gaze snapped to Elena. "What is this?" he asked, his voice low but edged with betrayal. Her hands shook, her mind reeling. "I have no idea who he is," she said, her voice cracking but firm. "This is fake." Margaret's voice cut through the murmurs, loud and deliberate. "We told you she was lying about her past, Victor. She's not who she says she is." Beatrice piled on, her tone dripping with venom. "We warned you this was a scam." The guests shifted uncomfortably, some whispering, others staring at Elena like she was a puzzle they couldn't solve. But the worst was Victor's silence. He didn't defend her, didn't challenge Paul. Just stood there, eyes darting between the papers, the man, and Elena. That silence was a knife, twisting deeper than any accusation. Elena's thoughts raced. She'd always sensed Margaret and Beatrice's hostility, but this was beyond anything she'd imagined. A public ambush, designed to humiliate her on the day she was most vulnerable. She glanced at Victor, willing him to meet her eyes, to show a flicker of trust, but his face was a mask of doubt. Then she remembered the file, tucked into her satin purse at the altar's base, a precaution born of instinct and paranoia. Weeks before the wedding, Victor had mentioned, almost casually, that his family was looking into Elena. "They're just worried about me," he'd said, brushing it off. "You know how they are." But the comment lodged in Elena's mind like a splinter. She'd built her career on reading people, anticipating risks, and she wasn't about to be blindsided. First, she ran her own background check through a reputable service clean, as expected. No criminal record, no hidden debts, just a straightforward life of hard work and quiet grief over her mother's loss. But her intuition told her Margaret and Beatrice wouldn't stop at suspicion they'd invent something if they couldn't find it. On a whim, Elena contacted clerk of courts offices in several states, including Florida, where Margaret owned a vacation condo. She asked if any marriage records existed under her name, providing her details to ensure accuracy. The response from one county was startling. An attempted marriage registration had been filed years ago, but it was rejected. The identity documents didn't match, no valid ID, no verification, just a clumsy forgery that never made it to official records. The clerk's email was blunt: "No marriage exists." Elena printed it, along with the court's letter confirming the fraud, her hands steady but her heart racing. She sensed this was no coincidence. Then came Beatrice's mistake. She'd visited Elena and Victor's apartment to help with wedding signage, leaving her tablet behind. The screen was still on, her email open. Elena hesitated, snooping wasn't her style, but curiosity and fear won out. She scrolled and found a thread between Beatrice and a man named Paul Carter. One subject line stopped her cold script for the wedding interruption. The emails laid out a chilling plan. Beatrice coached Paul on what to say, how to act, even what to wear to look convincing but disheveled. Margaret had sent him $5,000 through a payment app, labeled consulting to dodge suspicion. Their goal was clear: make Victor doubt Elena, push him to abandon her publicly, leave her broken in front of everyone. Elena's fingers trembled as she took screenshots, saving every word. She didn't stop there. A friend in Florida, Carla, who'd met Victor's family during a group vacation, mentioned seeing a strange man near Margaret's condo months earlier. "He looked out of place," Carla said, describing someone matching Paul's build. Elena asked her to write a statement, which she did, notarized for weight. Elena also filed a preemptive restraining order against Paul, citing harassment based on the email's a long shot, but a legal marker. She compiled everything: court documents, screenshots, Carla's affidavit, the payment proof into a folder she kept close. A shield against whatever Margaret and Beatrice were planning. She'd hoped she wouldn't need it, but as Paul's voice echoed in the vineyard, she was grateful for her foresight. Now, with every eye on her, Elena straightened, her voice cutting through the chaos. This man was paid to come here, she said, loud enough for the back row to hear. Everything he said is a lie. I can prove it. Margaret snorted, folding her arms. Of course she'd say that. Elena reached into her purse, pulled out the folder, and handed it to Victor. His hands shook as he opened it, flipping through the pages the Florida court's letter debunking the marriage, Beatrice's emails plotting the disruption, the $5,000 transfer from Margaret, Carla's statement placing Paul near their property. Victor's eyes widened, then narrowed as he looked at his mother. Did you do this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Margaret's lips tightened, her silence damning. Beatrice shifted, her smirk fading. Elena faced the crowd, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. I don't care what anyone thinks of me, but I won't stand here accused of a crime that never happened. The truth is in that file. She paused, letting the weight settle, then added, including the police report and restraining order against this man. Paul's face blanched. He stumbled backward, muttering something incoherent, then bolted from the tent, leaving a trail of stunned whispers. Guests craned their necks, some standing to watch him disappear into the vineyard. Victor remained silent, clutching the file like a lifeline, his jaw clenched, eyes red. Margaret and Beatrice gathered their purses and left without a word, their heads high, but their confidence shattered. The officiant, Clara, tried to resume, but the moment was broken. Guests approached Elena cautiously, offering awkward apologies or stunned questions. Are you okay? Asked Victor's old college friend, his wife squeezing Elena's hand. Others avoided her, their discomfort palpable. Elena didn't cry, didn't collapse. She sat at a reception table alone, cutting a slice of the lemon raspberry cake she'd chosen with Victor months ago. It tasted like ash, but she ate it, refusing to let their sabotage erase her dignity. That night, she returned to their apartment, her dress still half-zipped, hair unraveling, makeup streaked. She sat on the edge of their bed, staring at the wall, not crying. Shock had locked her emotions away. She replayed Victor's silence, the way he'd stood frozen as his family's lies unfolded. Part of her wanted to pack a bag, leave California, start over where no one knew her name. Another part burned with a fury she'd never felt before. She wasn't done with Margaret and Beatrice, not by a long shot. By morning, Victor hadn't called or texted, his absence a fresh wound. But Beatrice was active. Elena opened her phone to find a social media post, a black square with white text. Sometimes the truth hurts, but lies hurt more. Family. First, kanchachad. Truth wins. Beatrice had posted it publicly, and the comments were a flood of curiosity and blind support. What happened, B? Wrote a cousin. You're so strong for this, added a stranger. One comment stung most, proud of you for exposing her. Elena's stomach twisted. They weren't just attacking her, they were crafting a narrative to bury her. Around noon, a knock broke her daze. Victor stood at the door, looking like he hadn't slept, red eyes, crumpled suit, tie gone. Can I come in? He asked, his voice hoarse. She stepped aside, saying nothing. They sat in silence, the air heavy with unspoken words. I didn't know, he said finally, staring at the floor. Elena nodded, waiting. They told me they were just concerned, that they'd run a background check. I didn't think they'd... She cut him off, her voice sharp. You believed him, Victor. You looked at me like I was a stranger, like I'd betrayed you. He didn't deny it, just nodded slowly. I froze. I panicked. I didn't know what to believe. She stood, walked to her bookshelf, and grabbed the envelope of printed screenshots, tossing it onto the coffee table. Then you should have asked, not stood there letting me drown. Victor opened the envelope, scanning the additional emails she'd saved Beatrice's instructions to Paul, Margaret's payment confirmations. His face tightened, a mix of shame and anger. He said he wanted to fix things, that he'd cut contact with his mother and sister for now. He suggested a trip, somewhere quiet to reset. Elena's eyes narrowed. Did you tell them what they did was wrong? Did you confront them the way you judged me yesterday? He looked down, his silence louder than any answer. She nodded, the decision settling in her chest. That's what I thought. The days that followed were a blur of whispers and retaliation. Victor's cousin, Anna, messaged Elena, her tone apologetic but urgent. I'm so sorry, but you should know Mom and Beatrice are telling everyone you faked that file to frame them. They're saying you're unstable, that you manipulated Victor. Elena's jaw clenched. She'd expected pushback, but this was a new low. Then came a call from her biggest client, a fashion brand called Coastal Luxe. Her contact, Carla, sounded furious. Someone sent an anonymous email to our HR team, Elena. Claims you've got a criminal record, used fake credentials. The works. I know it's garbage, but this is serious. Want us to investigate? Elena's hands shook as she thanked Carla, promising to follow up. This wasn't just personal, it was an attack on her livelihood, her reputation, everything she'd built. She spent hours combing through her digital footprint, checking for other signs of sabotage. Late one night, scrolling through a local community forum, she found a post under an anonymous handle, "Beware of Elena Martinez, marketing consultant." A shady past lies about her work. It had a handful of likes, including one from an account linked to Beatrice's email. Elena screenshotted it, her anger simmering into resolve. She wasn't just fighting for herself, now she was fighting for every boundary they'd crossed, every lie they'd spun. Then Beatrice texted, her tone deceptively calm. "You should stop pretending, Elena. You've done enough damage. Meet me, just us, no drama." Victor, who had been sleeping on a friend's couch, called when Elena showed him the message. "Don't go," he urged. "They're desperate." But Elena needed to hear Beatrice admit it, to see the cracks in her facade. She chose a diner off Highway 101, packed with families and truckers, public and safe. She slipped her phone into her pocket, recording, and waited. Beatrice arrived, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, a kale smoothie in hand. She sat across from Elena, her smile practiced, but brittle. "You're not going to win," she said, leaning forward. "We were protecting Victor. You embarrassed him, our family, and now you're playing the victim." Elena stayed silent, letting her talk. Beatrice's voice grew sharper. "You think your little file makes you smart. It makes you desperate." Then she faltered, her confidence slipping. "Paul was a friend of a friend. We paid him, but we didn't think he'd actually show up. He went rogue." Elena's voice was calm, deliberate. "You emailed him a script." Beatrice's smirk returned, but it was shaky. "Prove it." Elena left the diner with the recording burning a hole in her pocket. That night, her phone rang an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. It was Paul, his voice slurred, heavy with regret or liquor. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know how far they'd take it." Elena gripped the phone, her pulse quickening. "You screamed I was married to you." He sighed, a broken sound. "They told me you were dangerous, that you'd scammed Victor's last project, nearly bankrupted his firm. Margaret said you'd ruin him financially, that I was helping a good guy. I didn't know it was all lies. My kid's sick, Elena hospital bills, no insurance. I needed the money." Then he said, "I kept the messages. I didn't delete anything." He was scared, his voice trembling as he described Beatrice's threats, lawsuits, smears against his family if he talked. Elena's voice softened but stayed firm. "Send me the messages, Paul. Do the right thing." By morning, her inbox was flooded texts, emails, a voice memo of Beatrice coaching Paul on his lines, even a photo of the fake certificate. Elena added them to her file, along with the diner recording. She called Priya, her lawyer, a no-nonsense woman who'd handled corporate fraud cases. Priya listened, then laid out options: defamation, emotional distress, conspiracy to defraud, harassment. "If Paul testifies," she said, "this gets criminal." Paul agreed, his guilt outweighing his fear. Elena thought the evidence would end it, but Margaret and Beatrice were relentless. Victor asked to meet, choosing a cafe by the lake where they'd shared their first date. He looked like a ghost, hollow eyes, unshaven, his hands fidgeting with a coffee cup. "I know they lied," he said. "I've read everything you sent. I confronted them. Margaret says it was to protect me. Beatrice won't admit anything, but I believe you." Elena studied him, searching for the man she'd loved. "What are you going to do about it?" He hesitated, his voice small. "I'm not sure. They're still my family." Her heart sank, but she nodded, the decision clear. "Then this is done." She walked away, the lake's calm surface a stark contrast to the storm inside her. A week later, an email landed from a headhunter, offering a marketing director role in Miami, 6 figures, relocation bonus, fast track to VP. Elena hadn't applied. The recruiter cited B. Stevens as the source. It clicked Beatrice's middle name was Sophia, flaunted on her LinkedIn to sound polished. Elena sensed a trap, but scheduled a Zoom interview, her curiosity outweighing caution. When the call connected, Margaret appeared, dressed in a blazer, posing as regional HR director. We're very interested, she said, her smile tight. But we need to verify your criminal record, legal history, financials. We take that seriously. Elena played along, asking polite questions, recording every second. After, she contacted the real company, a luxury brand with no record of the job or Margaret. They were impersonating executives, digging for dirt that didn't exist. Elena's anger grew, but so did her strategy. She hired a private investigator, a grizzled ex-cop named Tom, to trace Paul's connections to the Delgados. Tom found a paper trail bank records linking Paul to Margaret's consulting payments, even a lease showing he'd stayed at her Florida condo. Meanwhile, Paul called again, his voice panicked. They know I sent you the emails. Margaret's calling nonstop, saying they'll go after my sister. She's got a record, could lose her job. Then he revealed something worse. Beatrice had copies of your ID. She sent them before the wedding, said she got them from Victor's laptop. Told me to use your driver's license for the fake marriage filing to make it look real. Elena's breath caught. They'd stolen her identity, likely snapping a photo of her wallet during a family barbecue or a moment she'd left her purse unattended. This wasn't just a prank, it was a felony. She reported it to the police, filing a formal complaint with Priya's guidance. The officer, a stern woman named Detective Ruiz, took her seriously. Identity theft's no joke, Ruiz said. If you've got proof, we'll build a case. One morning, an anonymous email arrived. No subject, just a PDF. It was a dump of Beatrice's texts with Margaret, sent from a burner phone. Beatrice admitted everything hiring Paul, scripting the wedding crash, hoping Elena would lose her mind from stress. One message read, I don't care if she ends up in a psych ward. Victor deserves better. The sender was untraceable, but Elena knew it was Paul, cracking under the weight of his choices. Days later, a woman messaged her on social media. I think I dated Victor years ago. Saw a wedding video circulating. She sent a link to a private group, Justice for Victor, run by Beatrice with over 200 members. Posts vilified Elena. She tried marrying my brother while married in Florida. Don't let sociopaths win. Photos of Elena crying at the wedding, hair messy, eyes lost, were shared widely. A digital smear campaign. The woman, Sarah, shared her own story. Beatrice did this to me too, faked texts to make me look like a cheater, told everyone I was unstable. Elena asked for a statement. Sarah agreed, providing screenshots of old messages where Beatrice gloated about saving Victor. 2 more exes came forward, their stories eerily similar, Beatrice's sabotage, Margaret's silent approval. Elena's file grew Paul's confession, the fake job recording, ID theft proof, group screenshots, exes' statements. Priya was relentless, preparing civil suits for damages and criminal charges, identity theft, harassment, conspiracy. Victor texted one night, his words raw. If you sue, my family won't speak to me. Elena's reply was curt. Choose fast. She meant it. Her trust in him was frayed, his inaction a wound that hadn't healed. The turning point came at a charity dinner hosted by Victor's cousin, Lila, for a children's education fund. It was held at a lakeside manor, all crystal chandeliers and velvet drapes. Victor texted hours before, please come. I need everyone to hear the truth. Elena wavered. Could she trust him? But went, needing closure. The room hushed as she entered, her simple black dress a stark contrast to the glitz. Margaret forced a smile, her eyes cold. Beatrice whispered to an aunt, both laughing. Victor took the podium, his hands shaking as he tapped the mic. Before we talk fundraising, I need to address something ugly, he began. He apologized to the crowd, his voice cracking. At my wedding, a man claimed Elena was married. Some of you saw it, maybe believed it. I did, for a moment, because I didn't trust her fully. I was wrong. He faced Margaret and Beatrice. My family planned it. They hired him, used stolen info, paid to humiliate her, and I stood there. Gasps followed, murmurs of shock. Beatrice stood red-faced. Victor, stop! Margaret hissed, but he continued. Elena had proof emails, payments, texts. I saw how you tried to get her fired, Beatrice, your online group. You lied about other women too. I've spoken to them. Lila stood, her voice sharp. A fake job interview? Really? Margaret grabbed the mic, pointing at Elena. This woman poisoned our family, turned my son against us. Elena rose, her voice clear. What have I done, Margaret? but love Victor and endure your attacks. Margaret spun to the crowd. I was protecting my son. Victor cut in, his voice raw. No, you controlled me. For years. I'm done. Beatrice stormed out, Margaret trailing as voices rose. That's awful. They should face consequences. Guests approached Elena, some hugging her, others apologizing, their sincerity a balm after months of doubt. Victor stood by her, exhausted but present. Outside, he asked, Can we fix this? She paused, the weight of their history heavy. Maybe, but not now. Weeks later, Beatrice was served papers, identity theft, harassment, civil suit. Paul's affidavit, the ex's statements, the group's posts were evidence. Margaret offered a six-figure settlement. Elena refused, choosing justice over silence. She and Victor talked raw, honest conversations about trust, guilt, and rebuilding. He'd waited too long but finally stood up, losing his family's approval but gaining clarity. The scars lingered. Elena flinched at unknown calls, woke to nightmares of Paul's voice, questioned her instincts. But she rebuilt new clients, new boundaries, a new sense of self. Margaret and Beatrice faded, their influence eroded by truth. Elena's peace wasn't in revenge, but in being seen, believed, and free to write her own story.